What's up guys, back with another video here. So if you guys saw the last video, I went through and kind of went over the ITBs and just kind of did like answered some of the frequently asked questions that I was getting with the ITBs and stuff. So in today's video I am gonna be redoing an old video. So the first video that I actually made on this channel was a basically like a manual rack and pinion conversion. So I converted the factory CB7 hydraulic power steering rack and pinion over to a manual rack and pinion. So not exactly just like looping the lines. So I mean, that's a simple way of getting rid of power steering. So I'm not just gonna be looping the lines. So that's like the easy way of getting rid of power steering. You just kind of loop the two lines, keep the power steering fluid in there, and there you go. You don't have power steering. You can get rid of the power steering pump and all that stuff. But I'm gonna be doing it a different way, and we'll get into that in this video. So like I said, I did do this video a long time ago. This is like one of the first videos on the channel. So this video will be kind of going over like some of the same information that I already covered, but this time hopefully I'll have a little bit more input, since I have done a couple more rack and pinion since then. But hopefully this time I won't have any technical difficulties with the microphone, because in that video I pretty much had to like voice it over because the microphone gave out on me. And yeah, hopefully this video is just a little bit better. So yeah, let's get right into it. So here's the rack, and right now I'm not too sure if I'm making my life more difficult or easier at the moment, but I'm not gonna lift the car to get the rack out. I'm just gonna try to get it out right here. So if you guys can see, I already got the tie rods, the tie rod ends disconnected. It's already disconnected from the spindle, and up here I already cut pretty much all of the lines for the power steering and stuff. So I don't really have anything to worry with that. So I'm not really even gonna disconnect any of the lines from the rack itself. But from here, in order to get it out, I think it's just 2 bolts that mount it onto the subframe. And then over here, there's this like a horseshoe shaped mount that holds this side of the rack. So in total, I think it's just 4 bolts, and this thing should be out of here. And oh yeah, I also did unbolt the bolts on the steering column on the inside over here. I'll show you guys those in a little bit, but I already did loosen those. And luckily for us, with Accords and I think DAs and stuff, they have the same rack where there's really nothing on the subframe that really gets in the way, because you just need to clear this little like cross support that goes through here, and the same over here on this side. So other than that, the rack is very open right here. So I don't know, we'll just give it a try like this. If it is more difficult, then I'll just go ahead and jack it up, get this thing on jack stands, and we'll go from there. But I think I should be able to get it out of here while it's on the ground. Let's give it a try. Alright guys, so now that I actually have the rack and pinion out, we're gonna start getting into this thing. So I'm gonna start tearing this thing apart and get into it, because I'm gonna be converting this thing over to a manual rack and pinion, because I'm just getting rid of the power steering. I'm not gonna loop the lines, I'm not gonna do anything like that, just because this, if you look at this rack and pinion, it is a little bit more complicated. And yeah, if you did want to get rid of power steering, you could just simply loop these lines right here. I think these are the ones for left and right. But the problem with just looping your lines is this whole system is still filled with power steering fluid, and these are very prone to leaking. So if you guys have an old Accord, I'm pretty sure you guys have some sort of power steering system leak. I'm pretty sure there's power steering fluid leaking from somewhere. I'm just really not a fan of power steering fluid. I don't really like how much these Accords leak and stuff like that. So that's already one reason. And for those of you guys who are skeptical, I did do this before in my other CB7, and I ran it like that for over 5 or 6 years and no problems. I took it apart one time after like 3 years of using, and there wasn't any sort of excess wear. I just added a little bit more grease and we were good to go. So again, I'm not too worried about it wearing out prematurely or anything like that. It lasted me pretty long, and honestly, in my opinion, that was like one of the best mods I did to the CB7. As far as like the handling and drivability, it just improves it so much. It just gives you a lot of steering response, and yeah, it just makes it super solid, and you have a lot of feedback on the road, you have a lot of feedback on the wheels. So yeah, I really like it. So let's just get right into it. I'm gonna start taking this thing apart, and yeah, let's get it. Alright guys, so I ran into a technical difficulty. So when I was taking this assembly off right here, I completely rounded off one of the bolts. So I just had to get the little Dremel and cut the head of the bolt off completely. And I mean, I'm getting rid of this whole little assembly right here. So this is basically the assembly where all of the lines go into. So just know that there's 4 lines in this assembly. So this rack and pinion does have a lot more lines than most rack and pinions out there, so that does make it a lot more clunky. And this thing does kind of weigh a little bit, and if you kind of pay attention, you could see how much this actually sticks down from the subframe. So this actually does kind of take away some clearance, and along with the lines coming out, it just kind of sticks down a little bit further. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm getting rid of this completely, so this isn't even going to be there. And basically I'm just going to cut myself out a piece of aluminum, because I have some aluminum in the garage, but I'm just going to make myself a little template for this right here. And along with cutting that piece of metal out, something that I do, so this is pretty important to this actually. So if you guys look at this pin right here, this little pin, when you take it out, you can kind of see that there's some play in it, right? So if you look, the play in it does actually translate to this shaft actually spinning. So there's some play in the shaft. If you do make it a completely manual rack, you'll notice that this little bit of play is actually going to translate to kind of a lot of movement in the steering wheel, which I want to get rid of, you know. So basically the play in this is just for the hydraulic system inside to choose which side to send the pressure to. So if you start turning this way, it'll send the pressure over to one side. You start turning this way, it'll send the pressure to that side. So that's basically all that's for. So whenever I cut that piece of metal out, I'm actually gonna drill out a little hole so this pin can stick through. So that pin will be sticking through the piece of metal, and the piece of metal is actually gonna keep the pin stuck in one spot. So there won't be any play, and that'll keep it nice and solid in the steering wheel. So that is actually kind of important to doing this. So yeah, this is basically what it looks like. Once you take it off, there's an O-ring around this. So there's an if you guys are just like rebuilding the rack, there's an O-ring around this. There's 2 O-rings there, and be careful because there's these little like control jets. So these are like little jets to, I'm pretty sure they're to control the amount of pressure that's going through. And yeah, and then this little pin sticks inside that hole right there, so it kind of goes in there. And this O-ring basically seals this, because all of this would be submerged in power steering fluid. So keep that in mind. From here, I'm just gonna take these 4 10mm bolts off, and then from there I could actually take this whole assembly off. There should be some snap rings in there. All right guys, so I just spent about 2 hours fighting one inner tie rod. So it was this, it was the passenger side inner tie rod, and if you guys look, I completely mangled this thing. So this, like the actual flat side they used to get the inner tie rod loose, I like completely rounded it out. And honestly, I'm not too sure how I even got it out. pretty sure the WD-40 that I was using probably finally soaked in, and then I got it out. But anyway, we got it out. We got both of the inner tie rods off. So now that I have the inner tie rods off, I should be able to get this like internal sleeve out of here. So I'm just gonna take these off. I think these are 10 millimeters or 12 millimeter. So I could get these off right here, and that should allow me to slide this whole cylinder out. So yeah, let's go ahead and get that started next. Hopefully I don't round out any more bolts on this thing, because so far this thing has been fighting me so much. I think this is a remanufactured rack and pinion, so I think somebody did replace this on the Coupe at some point in its life, just because the remanufactured ones are all, you can tell because they're all full of this paint. The OEM ones don't usually have this like cheap paint that peels off like this, so usually this is a sign of a remanufactured one. So I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world. The bushings still look actually pretty decent, so I mean, it is good. And then these are So I'm gonna get started on that. It's just a couple like ring gears. So there's a mini ring gear right there, and that'll keep this, that keeps this whole thing together. So you need to take this one off right here at the top, and then you need to take this bottom one out right here. I should be able to take that whole thing apart. I forget which one out of these, because I think this small one, there's a, if you look in here, there's a mini one that's only on this shaft right here, and then there's a bigger one that's holding the whole thing. I forget which one, but I'm pretty sure you only need to take one of them out, and I think it's the bigger one, because I think if you get the bigger one out, you can take the whole assembly all apart. So I'll get started on that. Alright guys, so I just got the rack to this point here, so I can't take this shaft out just yet because I have to get this assembly all taken apart, and right now I can't find any snap ring pliers, so I'm gonna have to go get some. Alright guys, just got back with some brand new snap ring pliers, so let's go ahead and get these all off. So it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm just gonna take all of them off. Cool, so now I got, and this is basically it. This is the pinion gear right here. So it's actually the like the steering column rod. So this is what actually like pretty much goes inside the firewall and attaches to the steering column, and then it's attached to the actual pinion gear. So this gear is what actually drives this rack gear. So it goes against this rack gear and boom. So now that the pinion gear is out, I should be able to slide the whole thing. Boom. So this is all just a big rod. So just one solid rod with the rack gear on it. So you can see that that's that. Boom. So this is how that works. So it's something like this, you know. So this is the pinion gear rack. So rack and pinion. That's all it is. Oh, hold on. I think I might need this out. And then this is that tension. So this is that little like tension cylinder I was talking about. I don't even know what you really call this, but this goes right here. And then this guy basically goes against the actual like rack gear. on the opposite side of the actual gears. So this basically just gives it tension to make sure that the gears are actually engaging properly. So yeah, this is just kind of like a bearing material. And on the other side of this, so on this side, there you could actually like fill this with grease. So I make sure whenever I do this, I actually like overstuff this with grease, because this is kind of like the only source that's gonna actually be like feeding the whole shaft with grease itself. So, and then this guy basically just comes out that way right there. I just popped it out with the little wrench, and then this is like the actual assembly. So this is what I'm actually talking about. This is that little pin that sticks up, and this is what decides, or this is what selects what direction it's gonna go. So if you guys actually look at this, it's just kind of designed to actually have play. So it's not that the rack is like worn out and has play over time. It's that the actual design of this rack and pinion, it's designed to actually have this play to actually select which side gets the pressure. But yeah, so from here I'm gonna try to clean everything up and clean this up, and then from there I'm gonna re-grease everything. So the whole idea is to just, I'm gonna basically fill this thing up with grease right here. I'm gonna grease everything inside. There's a couple journal bearings in here. There's an actual bearing right there. I'm just gonna make sure everything's all greased up. All right guys, and here we are. So I just got the masking tape on. I filed down all the edges. So from here, I can just pretty much rip it all off, and we're left with that. So that's the actual shape. I'm gonna go ahead and carefully take this off and then go and stick it onto the sheet of metal. And then from there, I can actually mark that out, and that'll be the template that I'll cut out. Before I do that, I'm gonna mark all of the holes. All right guys, so I already got the template already stuck on, and I already got some marked out right here. As you can see, I already marked out 2 just in case, because I already know how this goes. It's usually not too perfect. I don't have the best tools for cutting this. All right guys, just got done with the little block off plate. So you can kind of see this thing is actually fitting way better than the original one that I made. So yeah, it fits up pretty good. I think I'm gonna go get some other bolts to just get shorter bolts, because these are a little bit too long, and the factory bolts are gonna be way too long because that original block that was here is way bigger. So yeah, so there it is, and you can kind of see right here, this is what I'm talking about as far as that pin. So since that pin is sticking through the metal plate, it isn't going to have any play back and forth. So you can see I'm trying to wiggle it back and forth, and there's no play. The only play right now is the plate itself, because I don't actually have it tightened down. But once it's all tightened down, then there shouldn't be any play. So pretty much from here, I'm going to go through. I already cleaned all of the parts of the rack, so this is already kind of clean. I cleaned all the other parts, so I just need to go through and re-grease everything, and then I can put this back together. And when I actually go to put this plate on for the final time, I'm actually going to put some Honda Bond on it just to make sure it's all sealed up from the inside. And we should be all good to go. So I'm going to start off with the internals, just kind of grease all this up, make sure the bearings have some grease. And then from there, it is pretty important that I get all of these areas. So these are going to be the areas that are going to have like a tight fit with the actual shaft. Along with that, there's another one on this side over here. The last time that I did this, I cut this ring off. But for now, I'm going to grease this, and I'm going to assemble it with this on and see what it feels like. I'm going to see if it gives any resistance or anything, because I already know what it feels like without it. So I'm going to feel it out, see what it feels like with it, and I'll report back to you guys. But anyway, I'm just gonna get started, start greasing this whole thing. So I'm gonna grease all of this. Obviously, I need to make sure I get a good amount of grease on this, make sure I grease the back side of it. I'm gonna make sure I grease all of this assembly, all in here, in there, in there, in here. So just basically anything that you know is going to be moving, anything that you know is moving on the inside, just put some grease on it and boom, that should be good. So I'm gonna get started, get some gloves on, and let's grease it up. And then it should slide in nicely since you just greased everything. And then once it's through all the way on the other side, you can tell over here it's kind of dry just because all of the seals on the inside kept the grease on this side of it. So then from there, I'm just gonna throw a little bit more grease on this side, and then from there I could actually fill the gears up with grease. So put a nice layer, make sure it's all in the gears, because again, this is the only thing that is going to be keeping it from wearing down. This is going to be the only thing that's going to be kind of like maintaining temperature and stuff like that, you know. So just make sure you get this thing covered in grease, because usually this is submerged in power steering fluid, so it's submerged in oil, and that's usually what maintains the heat, that's usually what maintains the wear and all that stuff. So this is just replacing that fluid, and just make sure you're generous with the grease on this. That's all I'm trying to say. Alright guys, just got this whole thing all assembled again, and you can kind of see it cycles through the travel pretty smooth. I'm just gonna go through and put some more grease on the gears, so you can see now that the gears have all engaged, it's kind of taken away a lot of that grease. So I'm gonna make sure I put more grease on these gears, and then from there I'm gonna clean and put the this tensioning screw back in, and that goes on the opposite side of the actual gears. And before I actually put that in, again, I'm just gonna put a big clump of grease on that. Alright, and then whenever you're putting this sleeve back in, you're actually going to be fighting that spring that's on the inside. I think I talked about that spring. So you do kind of want to push down on it while you're trying to get these things threaded back on. And it'll make life a little bit easier. All right, there we go. Now it's done. All sealed up. Ooh, I should have put some in the middle right here because some dust could get in that, but that's whatever. This is pretty good. So the outside of the rack is all cleaned up. I cleaned up all the grease on the outside, and yeah, this thing is ready to go now. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is a hydraulic power steering rack and pinion converted over to a manual rack and pinion. Pretty easy stuff, super simple. All right, and just to show you guys a little bit closer how the inner tie rod goes installed. For those of you guys who are just gonna be replacing an inner tie rod, this kind of will help you visualize it or see what you're getting yourself into. But so I'm not actually gonna be reusing this one. This is the one that got all messed up, but just to show you guys what you guys have going on here. So this is what you have going on with the inner tie rod. Whenever you get it, you should get new hardware. So you'll have this lock washer. It should not be all mangled like mine is. And the lock washer will have these little tabs. So that's what links up to these little divots on that. And then from there, you're gonna have the actual main washer. So put this guy on, and that goes over everything. So this is the actual washer, and then the bottom one is the lock washer. So then it should thread on, and you can just thread it on, boom, boom. If you take a closer look, you just wanna make sure that that lock washer lines up, lines up with the little grooves, which it's not, okay, there we go. And there you go, you can kind of see those little grooves go in, and then once that's all in, you could tighten everything down. So then from there, this right here, I'm not too sure if it's gonna be the same all around, like if it's the same on all OEM platforms, because sometimes the remanufactured stuff can be like different sizes. But for this is a 17, so you could hold this down with a 17 wrench, and then this right here on the shaft, you could hold this down with a 22 millimeter. And then once you tighten that up, the most important part is gonna be locking this. So the lock washer isn't doing anything until you actually bend this down and lock it with the flat part on this right here. So on the actual inner tie rod, because without it, the inner tie rod could loosen up with vibration and stuff like that. So if you actually bend the lock washer down to the flat part, it mechanically locks it so it can't loosen up. All right, guys, there we go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap the video up right here. So it is pretty straightforward, pretty basic to convert that rack and pinion over to a manual rack. That same process, I think, can be applied to pretty much any old Honda. So DAs and EFs, I think that should be pretty much the same process. And I think CDs have the exact same rack as a CB7. So yeah, so other than that, I'm gonna wrap this video up here. If you guys did learn something new today, if you guys did get any of your questions answered, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.